hold up just one.
Just one bit.
Total time, 5 minutes, 26.58 seconds.
Hi, this is Casting Nets with Tony and Chris. I am Chris Stewart here with Tony Brandt, and we are bringing you a brand new podcast that we are doing for the first time. This is episode number 1, and every week we're going to come to you talking about the new evangelization, how we as Catholics have an obligation to share our gospel, and hopefully we're not only going to talk about what that obligation means, but we want to inspire you and equip you to answer that call and to be able to share the gospel. Each week we'll have a challenge of the week. We'll have a catch of the day. Every week we're going to have something new all about this work of bringing the gospel to others and bringing this hope and mercy of Christ to the world. And we ask you, first of all, to be able to go and like and subscribe if you have not our YouTube channel. That way you can get notifications as soon as we come on the air when we post something new there. That's a huge help for us. Like the video, share it, and join us every single week. Tony, how are you doing?
I'm doing really great today, Chris. It is a pleasure and a joy to be back on the air. For those of you that are listening, the origin of Casting Nets Ministries really was to go out and to share the gospel with the media. And we did that originally with our radio show that we did for 8 years, a couple of different stations. One of those stations at the very beginning was just not very strong, and it was just a lot of fun. We had a lot of shows, and we just continued to go on and on and on. But this is a great
I feel
opportunity.
a lot like this was our first, like when we did our first show, this is what I feel like right now.
With
like
all the
I have
mistakes and all
no idea what we are doing. I don't know if anyone is listening. I don't know if this is actually leaving the room right now.
Yep.
But it feels like, you remember the first show we ever did?
I do remember the first show. The first show we ever did on the radio, we were so nervous about being on the radio. I mean, we can speak in front of 1,000 people, but to be on the radio just seemed daunting. And so we went out to the studio at midnight, 45-minute drive outside of town to start a show at midnight for only 30 minutes. But we did it at midnight just because we knew that no one was listening.
Yeah, who listens to Catholic radio at midnight? And we had like 8 pages of notes. We wrote entire outlines. It was basically a small book that we wrote to do a 30-minute show. And we went out there and we covered like a quarter of the page.
Right. And I think we were both speaking at the same time. We were just talking so fast we couldn't even take a breath for the entire 30 minutes. I do remember we had one listener that I was aware of. One of our local priests woke up in the middle of the night and turned on his radio because he couldn't sleep, and he heard us speaking. He was like, "What are these guys doing?" And he started giving us trouble after that, just for how many little mistakes and how fast we were speaking, just like we are right now.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's just like the first show. And I don't know if anyone is listening, but we're here and we're doing it. And I'm excited that we're going to be redoing this podcast, if you will. And like you said, it's a time to kind of go back to where we began. And in this new venture of this socially distanced world that we are in, I think it makes even more sense.
Yeah. This idea of being able to reach out, heeding John Paul II's call to the new evangelization and to evangelize in new ways, that's what we were talking about all the way back when we were getting on the radio. But how much has the world changed even since then? When we were doing that radio show all the way back in the day, what was that, 2005 or so that we started, and how much the world has changed and how much the internet has become a part of it, how streaming has become a part of it. People don't even have cable TV anymore because they just subscribe to streaming movie stations and all these things. And here we are trying to ride that wave as well and to be a part of everything we can do to encourage and to inform, to inspire people to share the gospel in unique ways, even if it is from their own homes, even in the midst of that social distancing, that we still have an ability to take on what is right in front of us and to take on that gospel and to share that love and mercy with the people around us.
So what I heard you just say is that there is a chance that somebody is listening to us right now. That's what I heard.
So.
That's what I heard you say. Well, Tony, I'm really excited about the topic that you brought up. You said, I asked you, so we're doing this first episode, Tony. Do you actually have something we're going to talk about? And I'm excited. I think this is something that we have talked about many times. And again, given that this is Holy Week, given that we are in this pandemic that nobody in our lifetime has remembered anything like this, I think this topic is even more crucial.
I think it is. This pandemic has created a situation of what we have always talked about on different shows, in our books, in our lectures, of human moments. And so today we want to really talk about human moments and then go into Catholic moments. And what are those? When we look at what a human moment is, it's those times in our lives when everything that is a distraction to life kind of dissipates around us. That all of a sudden, the people that we're speaking with, maybe it's because of a funeral, maybe it's because of the birth of a child, maybe it's because of a tragedy in your life, or everyone is affected by a pandemic, then all of a sudden, a lot of the things that we thought were priorities no longer are priorities. And people are really searching for answers. People are searching for truth. People are trying to find themselves in the midst of the moment. And I think that those are prime opportunities to engage. Because as Christians, as Catholics, I feel like that is our priority. Our priorities are the truth and those important things in our lives. And we try not to be distracted. We fail all the time, right? But we try not to be distracted by the world all the time. And we try to focus in. Well, now is an opportunity to actually have that conversation, to have real conversations, to reset relationships, and to allow those things to recapitulate, to bring a new desire of relationship back into the world and into our neighbors, into our friends, into our families. Yeah. That is what the human moments are all about.
And that's what, for me, Tony, when I describe to somebody what we mean by a human moment, a Catholic moment, look, the gospel can always reach people at any time, right? Because the Holy Spirit it doesn't matter. He'll take down every wall anytime. But there are certain times in which the gospel just seems to be able to be front and center, that people seem to be, maybe they weren't open before, but all of a sudden something happens in their life, this moment in their life in which they are now listening in a different way. I think of it for me, and we're kind of sports guys. So I think of it like this. You know what it's like, Tony, when it's August going into September, and then that north wind comes out and it's got that little chill to it. And what rolls through your mind?
Fresh cut grass.
No, not in September it doesn't, but it comes to it comes to me.
Fresh
it's like
cut grass of a football field.
Football field. That's why that
smell.
Wind hits you and you're like, oh, it's football season, right?
Right.
Are we going to go to the game tonight, right? Or the same, in the spring, right? That I actually think of the fresh cut grass. I think of going to Little League baseball practice, right? And it's warm, and now that wind's coming out of the south. And it's warm, you're like, oh, yeah, it's baseball season, right? Those moments when all of a sudden, oh, okay, now I'm thinking this. And this is what we mean, that there are just human moments and there's Catholic moments that all of a sudden people become aware. They become just more open. Again, right. The Holy Spirit and the gospel can run any time that it wants, but we, as people who want to engage, we as people who want to bring that gospel to others, need to be aware of the moments that they are in order to effectively communicate the gospel. I tell you what, Tony, let's go ahead and take our first break, and then we're going to be right back. Again, this is Casting Nets with Tony and Chris. Please, again, share this, like it, subscribe to it, and we will be right back. This is Chris Stewart of Casting Nets with your Catch of the Day. Pope Benedict XVI said in his encyclical Spe Salvi, quote, "We become capable of the great hope, and thus we become ministers of hope for others. Hope in a Christian sense is always hope for others as well. It is an active hope. in which we struggle to prevent things moving towards the perverse end. It is an act of hope also, in the sense that we keep the world open to God. Only in this way does it continue to be truly a human hope, end quote. May we be today that sign of hope for someone around us. Get your catch every day by visiting us at castingnetsonline.com. And remember to keep casting your nets out into the deep. I am Chris Stewart here with Tony Brandt, and today we've been talking about what we mean by Catholic moments and human moments, and we really are diving into right now as to what we mean by this human moment and how we are actually in one right now.
Yeah, the coronavirus has kind of thrown us into a human moment where everyone is kind of, the priorities that they have, some of the life goals, maybe the distractions of the world are not as prevalent because the huge distraction of the virus and this pandemic is occupying their time. Which by the way, when we talk about occupying their time, it seems as though the time that's being occupied is being occupied by real life questions. Where are we? Where am I right now? Am I ready to go? Because you hear about all the deaths around us. You hear about the things that are happening, people getting sick. Do I have my ducks in a row? Or have I just been kind of flying by the seat of my pants and everything's all over the place? Which for a lot of us, maybe that has been the case. But all of a sudden we reprioritize, and it allows us to get into deeper discussions with one another. I've had deeper discussions with a lot of people around me that I haven't had in the past, or maybe I've been waiting for that moment, and all of a sudden here they are really willing to open up because of that human moment, because of that virus has put maybe a little bit of fear in people's minds, or has allowed them to kind of really dive into their inner self a little bit more and deal with some of the tough questions. Yeah,
and I want to be clear with these human moments. These can be good things or bad things in people's lives. Right. So I think of a human moment is like someone has a child for the first time. Right. Or they have grandchildren, or they get married. These are all human moments. And all of a sudden they're open up to bigger questions. They can also be tragic things in their lives. Right. They lose somebody. Maybe there's a terminal illness that is diagnosed. Maybe they lose a job. Those are things that, again, it causes someone to stop and realize that there's a world beyond them, that there is things that are outside their control. And so I want to be clear, because everything that we typically think of in this pandemic is all bad, right? There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety caused by a lot of uncertainty. And I think, to me, Tony, you are right that I've heard so many people, even you even think about these commercials that people have been playing on normal TV or wherever, and they say, we are really realizing what's important in life, right? Our family, our friends, and as much work and as much, especially as Americans, right? We just find our identity in our work, where all of a sudden we're at home working, or many people unfortunately have lost their jobs, and they really have come to realize that, as fulfilling as that was, my family, my spouse, my children are more important. And so these deeper realities, I think, are certainly coming to mind.
Well, and even that priority back on our children and our spouses as we come home from work. I think number one, it's challenging us in new ways. It's challenging us, one, maybe for some, to get to know their children and to get to know their spouses again for the first time, right? But also because of the fear that is associated with this, even a level of how we, almost like we would with tragedy, whether we've had that tragedy as part of this pandemic or not, the way we deal with the fear, the way we're processing this, just the way that we understand that maybe I deal with fear, or I deal with the anxiety, or I deal with the worry or the stress differently than the person next to me. And those ideals, especially when we have to talk about them as a family, become a really good conversation, a very productive conversation, a very life-building conversation. And all of a sudden, I think we're going to come out of this on the other side of it with stronger families, with
Amen.
stronger marriages,
Yeah.
with people that are really living their lives in a way that go well beyond anything that they were living before. So, obviously there's a silver lining. I'm actually starting to lean away from the idea that this is a silver lining, that this is just the good coming out of evil, the good that triumphs out of every evil. The Lord has promised us that he will bring good out of all those evils. It's not a silver lining. It is actually almost like the phoenix rising from the ashes. It is going to be more beautiful and more triumphant than we've ever seen.
Yeah, I can't agree more. Again, I just think of, Tony, you and I have been in youth ministry. We did youth ministry for like 20 years, right, in some form and capacity. And how many times we would think about that statistic about when families eat together, right? Like every day of the week, of the 7 days, the more days that they ate together, the more successful the child was, the more well-balanced, the better psychologically they were. Every stat you could imagine, right? Each time from if they ate 2 days to 3 days to 4 days, it improved dramatically.
Right.
Right.
And that was a 20-year Harvard study.
Right.
That
So this
showed
it's
that.
it's not like you can deny it. And we all know this, right? But now all of a sudden, how many families are having 7 dinners together, right? 7 nights a week because of this. And what a chance. Now, Tony, the real question for me, though, becomes, so we're in this moment, but how then can the gospel really be brought into this human moment of this pandemic?
Well, I think just asking the questions, saying, let's have a conversation about this. Let's have a conversation about what happens when you're all alone. What happens if you contract the disease, the virus? What happens in our lives, and how do you want me to help you? How do you want me to carry on your legacy? How do you want me to, not just about legacy, really. It's more, what are your wishes? How can we reunite in our relationship? But just, I think also identifying those people that are really struggling. They're struggling with self-identity. They're struggling with the isolation. They're struggling with fear. This gives us an opportunity not only to reach out to them, but to teach our children to reach out to them, to teach others, to unite as a community, as Christians, to reach out into the community and see that there's an elderly person across the street who can't get out and is terrified to go to the grocery store. What can we get for them? What can we go to the grocery store for them? Do we have extra supplies that we could help them out with? There's a lot of little things that open the door to a simple conversation about our Lord and why we would even desire to help our neighbor. Why would we desire to do that? Other than are we motivated by a mercy and a love that comes from Christ? That is it. And when that opportunity and that door opens to have the conversation, we can have a real conversation that is not us pushing on, knocking on their doors and going door to door and thumping our Bibles, but rather a real conversation about humanity, of who we are and the fact that we really do care about them as Christians.
I think that care and that reaching out to somebody else is really what's key here. Think about this, Tony, we live in Kansas and we went on our statewide lockdown, 3 weeks ago, maybe 2.5 weeks ago, whatever it was. But there was a list of exceptions, right? This is what I find. There was a list of businesses that were considered to be essential, right? And if you go through that list, here's the thing. If you go through that list, what do they all have in common? They are all service-oriented. So obviously, doctors and nurses, right? First responders or police officers, even, the banks, lawyers, accountants, plumbers, electricians. These are all service-oriented. These are people that are actually taking care of, in many cases, our most basic needs. Right, needs that we can't really live our life without. And so to me, even if our secular government recognizes this, as Christians, we need to recognize this, that this is our moment to serve. how are we going to serve those in our community, those in our neighborhood that, like you said, I mean, Tony, that isolation that people might be experiencing. How many people have family members that maybe are in assisted living in which they've locked down? No one can even go and visit them anymore. Can we write letters? Can we ask, hey, do you have a family member that's in an assisted living place? We'd love to send them a care package or write them letters or do something to reach out to these people. And they may not be, well, how about people in hospitals that we can't even go see right now, right? Or people just in our neighborhood that maybe they're elderly and they don't want to get out and they shouldn't get out because they are at very vulnerable. What can we do to serve them as well? I think there are so many opportunities, but to me, Tony, this is where, as Christians, we should be shining in this moment.
Well, I think we should be shining in this moment because of the fact that it has shed light upon the works of mercy. It has shed light upon feed the hungry, clothe the naked, bury the dead. We can't even bury our dead.
Right. This
is handicapped all of us to the point where we have these corporal works of mercy, these acts that maybe we don't have the ability to do. Maybe we just have to shed a creative light on those things and figure out a way that we can still do that. But in the midst of that, we still have the spiritual works of mercy. We still have the ability over the phone or over Skype or over Zoom or whatever you're using to just pick up a phone and call someone and counsel the doubtful, to instruct the ignorant. That these corporal works of mercy that have been, the light has been shined on them to say, look, these are essential, which it seemed like we were ignoring before. Now they're essential, but now we can't do them. So what about the spiritual works of mercy? Why not highlight those spiritual works of mercy and go out and help people that are really struggling, that are doubtful, or that are ignorant, or that are really struggling with their own self-worth or the self-identity, and show them their identity in Christ. The God is a God of love who's madly in love with them, and we want to show them that by the way that we reach out to them and share just kind words, and just share attention with them.
Amen.
So,
amen. Well, let's go ahead and take another break, and when we come back, we want to, if we need to finish up anything about this human moment, but that we certainly need to get into this Catholic moment that we are also in this pandemic, as well as the Catholic moment that we are in every time this year. Yep. So we'll take a break. If you could do us a favor, please feel free to share this with others. Put it in your email or your Facebook or whatever social media you have, but like and subscribe on YouTube. We'd really appreciate it. But we'll be back in just a minute. This is Casting Nets with Tony and Chris.
If you're looking for ways to inspire yourself and others to share the good news of salvation with today's culture, then join Casting Nets Ministries on the internet at www.castingnetsonline.com, your resource for the new evangelization. We have articles on effective Catholic evangelization. There is a Q&A section for you to ask questions or see questions others have asked. Get the catch of the day to give you that boost of encouragement to bring Jesus Christ to others. If you missed an episode of Casting Nets with Tony and Chris, you can listen to past shows at the Radio Archive or subscribe to them with your iTunes account. There are multiple ways to connect to Casting Nets. Want to be a nethead? Become a fan on our Facebook page. Follow our entertaining tweets on Twitter or subscribe to site content via RSS feeds. Take us wherever you go. Join us in this all-important task to bring Christ to the world. Join us in casting your nets out into the deep at www.castingnetsonline.com.
Welcome back to Casting Nets with Tony and Chris. I am Chris Stewart here with Tony Brandt, and here in episode number 1, the first one. We've been talking about human moments and this Catholic moment, and we just kind of finish up our conversation. Unless, Tony, there's something else you want to get to when we talk about this human moment, but I was thinking maybe, unless there is, if we could go to this Catholic moment, what do we mean by that?
Well, I think the transition is pretty easy. When we see the corporal works of mercy, Christ is talking about the elderly or the lost and the forsaken. In the same way, those are human moments that we're encountering within the coronavirus. But he also said the poor you will always have with you. That we need to go out and to help the poor. But as Catholics, it leads us into this pandemic in a way that says, wow, we don't have our normal source of strength. We don't have our Eucharist. We don't have our normal sacraments, our normal sacramental life. We still have a life. We still have sacramental life, but it's just very different, and we have to adapt. And I think that when we talk about the Catholic moment, it's so interesting that weeks into this pandemic, weeks into this, mandatory stay-at-home orders and things like that, quarantines all over the nation, we also have the idea that it's Easter. It's Holy Week. Here we are in the midst of Holy Week. It's Holy Thursday, and we're not going to go to Mass today. And it's kind of strange to me.
Yeah, this what we usually mean by this Catholic moment, again, is that there are certain times which Catholicism is kind of placed on the world stage, right? And liturgically, we certainly have this, right? Christmas is a Catholic moment. No matter how secular it wants to get, that's still our moment. Even on the news, they'll show Mass, from the Vatican. Lent has always been a Catholic moment. Think about this. You start seeing commercials for fish sandwiches everywhere, right? And in other words, so when, even at your workplace, to sit there and go, well, I'm giving this up for Lent. You see, all of a sudden during Lent, that's not awkward. You're talking about something that you're doing in your faith, or you come back to work and you're not ashamed on Ash Wednesday to have a smudge on your forehead, right? It's all of a sudden a Catholic moment where our faith is accessible to everybody, and you can easily talk about it. Other Catholic moments could be, when we elect a new pope, right? Everyone talks about that. It's easy. So what do you think about the new pope? You can have that conversation with anybody. Or, to be honest, when there's bad things that happen, right? Even though we may not want to talk about it, all of a sudden we can have those conversations easily with people. When movies about the faith come out, and again, Tony, whether they are good, like we believe this, or they are bad, something that slanders the faith. Not that we need to go support it, but people in your workplace may, want to talk about it and say, hey, did you hear about that movie about, whatever said this horrible things about the church? Well, that really offends me, or whatever. That can lead into a conversation. That's what we mean by these Catholic moments. And again, we are smack dab in Holy Week and within this pandemic of a Catholic moment that we need to recognize and access this new grace.
Yeah, and I want to start really with the pandemic. That's what we were talking about with the human moment, but I think that it's created a Catholic moment out of it. I don't know if you know this, but or if you've noticed this, but our Facebook feeds are slammed every Sunday with Mass being celebrated on Facebook Live. YouTube is slammed with a whole bunch of liturgies and these priests walking in and investments, and all of a sudden the whole world has a view into the sanctuary. The whole world, the non-Catholic world, all of a sudden has a view into these sacred liturgies. And I think that because of that, our priests have become creative. Our parishes have become creative, some more than others, obviously. But just the idea that we have people that are going out there and live streaming a holy hour, live streaming 40 hours devotion, live streaming evening prayer, the liturgy of the hours, Mass, benediction. We've got, the Pope, for that matter, worldwide benediction from the Vatican. That's never been, done like that before, that everyone tuned in to just to have this opportunity. This pandemic has allowed the Catholic Church to rise up and to have an opportunity, to have a foothold, to have a pedestal to stand on and say, let's pray anyway. Let's not give in. Let's show, if the church can't come into the building, which I think is really interesting when I say that, it brings to mind the secular perspective of the freedom of worship versus the freedom of religion. That you can have your faith as long as you keep it in your church.
Right, yeah.
There is no church to go into now. So the church is exploding out into the highways and the byways. And we have all these amazing examples that I see of priests standing on a street corner with Jesus in the monstrance, blessing people as they drive by. And people honking and hooting and hollering because they haven't seen our Lord for 2 weeks. That's a pretty amazing thing. You know, we have street processions of priests doing Eucharistic processions for the first time maybe in their priesthood. You know, we've got, public rosaries. People, and actually even the Pope calling upon the whole world to pray with him at a specific hour, no matter your time zone, whether it's the Our Father or to pray a rosary or whatever it may be.
We did that chaplet, right?
Or when we did the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. These are the types of things that are happening that has taken a human moment and created a Catholic moment out of it. And I'm telling you, maybe it's because I live in such a Catholic bubble, but it seems to me that the whole world is starting to peek their eye at the Catholic Church saying, wow, look at what they're doing. I mean, the reality is that we're doing everything we can, and I hope that it continues. I hope that it continues to explode, and then it doesn't die off once we get to go back into the church.
Yeah, Tony, there's that pious expression that says the sun never sets, that the sun is always en masse happening, right? So in other words, around the world all the time, we have mass going on. And I thought, that's a beautiful expression. Well, I think we're pretty close to having proof of that now, right? Because when you open up your Facebook and you see how many masses are going on, and I'm pretty sure we could go to Facebook right now and there'd be a mass streaming somewhere right there that we could find. And I have loved how creative, our priests have gotten, our people have gotten when it comes to bringing grace to the church. In the sense of, you mentioned the adoration. I saw in one place actually took a monstrance, and in their foyer of their church, it was all glass. So they put the monstrance out there, right? I'm assuming they probably had an adoration chapel, and they put the monstrance out there so that people could just come in their cars in the parking lot and worship our Lord in adoration. All right, that's brilliant. I think of how many times I've seen now confessions taking place, Tony, not in the confessional. I mean, just wherever they can find a place, they set up a screen. They set up tents, whatever, your pastor's canopies are outside and listening to confessions. They've brought grace. And then obviously how many priests now have YouTube pages and Facebook pages. Priests that I know for sure were never on Facebook, all of a sudden are on Facebook, because I'd see they have 6 friends.
Right.
And I feel sorry for them. I should friend this priest because he has no friends, because they literally just started it. And now they are finding ways to bring grace to us in these moments. And I love it. And I know there's been a lot of people, a lot of parishioners that have some sort of tech ability that have been hammered upon to help their priest, get up and streaming, and how should I do this and how can I do this? And so I think it's been something beautiful.
Yeah, and I think that's the whole point, is that when we're talking about Catholic moments, we start with the pandemic, but then we move into, which 2 weeks ago we were all pretty scandalized by the fact that maybe there's a chance we won't have Easter liturgies. And 2 weeks ago, that didn't seem like, no, there's no way it'll last that long. There's no way we'd cancel Easter. I mean, the highest feast, the solemnity of solemnities. But here we are. And here we are with an opportunity that the Catholic Church is already on a pedestal because of the Easter Triduum, because of the liturgies of Holy Thursday and the liturgies of Good Friday, and then the Easter Vigil going into Easter Sunday. We've already got that as a forefront and an opportunity to talk about our faith anyway, and now the lack thereof becomes this obvious black hole. It's an obvious black hole worldwide, not just for Catholics, but for everyone. They're like, the the Vatican's not going to have Easter Mass. We're not going to have a worldwide televised, we are. It's just going to be live streamed, and there's not going to be anybody there, right? It's just the Pope. But the whole point is that as we move through this Easter Triduum, what are the opportunities that we have within our friends, within our families, to engage because of this? It gives us an opportunity to talk about it. It gives us an opportunity to think of unique things we can do with our families, with our friends, ways we can engage our neighbors who may or may not be Catholic. Maybe starting new traditions, starting different ways that we can participate in that Paschal mystery, to participate in it as a family, but as a community, to continue to build that community.
Yeah, Tony, something that I just thought of. We as Catholics, right, who are practicing, participating, we go to Mass every Sunday. It makes me think of those people that, we go to Mass every Sunday, but we all know what happens on Christmas and Easter. Right? People show up to Mass that are not there any other time of the year. Maybe they are there at Christmas. Maybe they're there at Easter. Maybe Ash Wednesday. That's a big one. A lot of people like Ash Wednesday. Got to get me some ashes. But here's the thing is that in this moment, Tony, people who they don't even go to Mass and they don't miss it, this Sunday, they're going to miss it. Because going to Mass is a part of their Easter. And they're not going to have it. Now, we've kind of adjusted to that, right? Our families, those that are practicing, we've found ways. So we stream it, and I've seen so many, right? I've seen people set up their chairs like in pews, right? Yeah. And they get dressed, and they probably are even sitting in the exact same order that they sit in the pew, right? Maybe they even set up a cry room. I don't know, all right? We've done things like, Lectio during Sunday Mass, and we have gotten used to it. But those people who don't go to Mass regularly have not gotten used to it yet. And so what are we going to try to do to reach out to them? I mean, maybe even during this Triduum, this is kind of who we need to focus on. The fact that, hey, if you haven't been to Mass in a while, I've been watching this priest do Mass. You're going to love him. He's going to stream this Mass at this time. Right? If you haven't been to Mass in a while, this is your chance to catch this beautiful service online. And just like we would if we were having Mass, right? We should, hey, where are you going to go to Mass on this Easter Sunday? We should be asking people that at work or at play or wherever we're at. So too, we got to do it now, because people who have not been going to Mass have not been streaming it, right? Because that wouldn't make any sense to them. But we can help them out in this, and they're going to want to do something in this moment. And I think we really got to take advantage of it.
Well, and I eventually here want to move into kind of what are some practical things we're going to do with our families to exercise that. But before we get there, I really want to encourage everybody out there and really help us understand that Holy Thursday it's one of those masses that every priest I know, it may be their favorite Mass. Like, they love Easter, they love Easter Vigil, but it is the institution of the priesthood. It is an anniversary of when Christ instituted that the apostles become priests. As I have done, so you must do. And he goes out, and this is a meaningful time for our priests. And I just can't help thinking throughout this, I feel sorry for all those families who can't take their whole family to Mass. I feel sorry for the people that are out there that maybe that's their only social outlet. The elderly, that maybe their only social outlet is to go to Mass every day and to see their friends. I feel sorry for them, and I feel bad, and I'm one of those. I heavily desire right now to go to Mass. However, priests that I know did not become priests so they could say Mass by themselves. Sure, they get to receive Jesus because they're a priest. They have the power to do that, but they desperately miss their people. And I think that we've got to understand the pressure they're under, but also the sorrow they're under, and to reach out to them and encourage them and continue to build them up and let them know, hey, happy Holy Thursday, the institution of the Eucharist, the institution of of the priesthood. Here we are. We are still united with you. We're still your children. You are still our pastor, and we love you, and we're praying for you. It's such an amazing opportunity, because I think those priests are really the ones that they'll put on a strong face, because they're the pastor. They're the father of this household, if you will, and they've got to. But we've also got to realize that they're struggling through this, and they cannot wait to have their people back in those pews. And I can't wait to see what that looks like. When we get out of this whole thing, I can't wait.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be bigger than any Easter vigil or Easter Mass we've ever seen. It's as long as people aren't paranoid to go back.
Right.
I think it's going to be one of the biggest, most amazing things we've ever seen.
I hope our churches are packed on those days. I mean, packed, standing room only for every single Mass, right? The morning Mass, the afternoon Mass, whatever it is, it should be packed. I really, it is interesting, Tony, that this Holy Thursday Mass, right, a priest is not allowed to say this Mass alone, right? There's a rubric that says they cannot say it alone. And
they can't say more than one.
Right.
It's one Mass.
And so the Holy Father, the Vatican itself, said, well, what are we going to do? So they actually had to release them from that. And so now we're going to have priests that are saying Holy Thursday Mass alone. And I tell you what, Tony, while we get to watch these services as the lay faithful, we can stream in and watch them. And in a certain sense, right, it looks the same as if we were, at Mass. Okay, our family sits up front, like in the first or second pew anyway, so there's no one in front of us. So this looks very similar to us, right? But I promise you, it looks dramatically different for the priest.
Wow. Yeah.
When he's either looking outside in his church, or I know some of them are saying it in the sacristy or maybe in their house, or they made something to kind of say that it would be better for filming or for whatever reason. But I promise you, it looks dramatically different to them. And to sit there and think that, I get this sense of like how we just started off, like, is anyone listening to us? We have no idea, right? If anyone is actually listening to us right now, when that priest is saying Mass and he's saying it for us, but he doesn't know if we're listening, if we're watching, if we're praying with him. He's literally alone. And so, Tony, I really do. I want to confirm what you're saying, that we need to support our priests. Let them know that we appreciate every effort that they are doing to bring that grace to us, to support them, that they are not alone, that we are praying for them just as they are praying for us. And got to support them, because you are right. They did not become priests so they could be in a rectory and in a church alone. They became priests to serve the people of God. And this has got to be rough on them, so please pray for them. Let's go ahead and take our last and final break, and then we'll come back and finish up this conversation, talking more about perhaps some practical things, and then whatever else, Tony, you wanted to talk about. Cause,
I'll probably think of something.
Yeah, all right. So this is Casting Nets with Tony and Chris. We'll be right back.
Casting Nets Ministries is a refreshing look at evangelization and catechesis. Tony Brandt and Chris Stewart have a combined 29 years of experience in almost every level of ministry, from the youth to college and from RCIA to adult formation. They have applied their unique approach to ministry with astonishing success and in a variety of settings, including retreats, lecture series, keynotes at conferences, and the classroom. Now they are taking their ministry to a town near you. Casting Nets is available for a wide variety of talks, series, or courses, even including an online live radio show. So whether you are hosting a parish retreat, conference, parish mission, day of reflection, in-service, or any event, contact us on how we can be of service to your ministry. Casting Nets will bring a great deal of inspiration and information in presentations that are humorous and entertaining with lots of impact. To schedule Casting Nets, please contact us at www.castingnetsonline.com or call 316-641-4050.
Welcome back to Casting Nets with Tony and Chris. I am Chris Stewart here with Tony Brandt. I encourage you once again, if you've been enjoying this, please like it, share it with others, subscribe if you have not already to the YouTube channel. But today we've been talking about human moments and Catholic moments in which the gospel kind of has an in, if you will, that there's just certain times in our lives as human beings, certain times in our lives as Catholics, that all of a sudden the gospel has a new platform, or people are just kind of more open to a conversation about God, about faith, about who He is in their lives. And we talked about that with the human moments, and we've talked about this in Catholic moments. And obviously, with all of this situation that we are in right now in the pandemic, and this unique situation that no one has experienced, but now we really kind of want to get into some practical sides of what we're going to be doing this Easter Vigil or this Easter season for ourselves, for our family, and to continue to bring the gospel to others.
Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations with quite a few people just asking, what are some of the things that you're going to do to help yourself and help your families better engage into the Paschal Mystery? What are some things we can do for Holy Thursday, for Good Friday, even all day Holy Saturday, which seems to always be kind of just a dark day at the beginning and then a triumphant day at the end, right? So what are we going to do maybe to re-engage or reinvent, re-energize our families in ways that allows the depth of that mystery to penetrate? This is a real opportunity. I think sometimes we use I don't want to say Mass as a scapegoat, but sometimes we just say, well, we go to Holy Thursday Mass. And that's it.
And we go home and we do our thing. Yeah.
Right. As opposed to, okay, well, I have to be active in this. I actually have to do something here. I have to be a part of this, or are we just going to watch it on TV and go about our way? We really do have an opportunity in each of these days to engage our families, to have conversations about the institution of the priesthood, the institution of the Eucharist, why Jesus washed the feet of the apostles, and maybe even read that passage. Maybe even wash the feet of our children, or wash the feet of your spouse or someone you love, and remember that great moment when Christ the master washed the servant's feet, and he showed himself to be the suffering servant, the one who serves this servant leadership. This is the type of thing that as we go through, there are a lot of resources online. And, one of my favorites that has been out there is Michael Hernon and his wife Alicia have put together a bunch of things. They're all about happy marriage. That's their whole shtick, if you will, is just really helping people get better as families and as couples. And they have put together an entire rubric for this. That you can use some of it, you don't have to use all of it. They're at messyfamilyproject.org. If you go to messyfamilyproject.org, you can find their stuff. But
and by the way, I'd really encourage you. They have a podcast.
Absolutely.
Messy Family. And they have more than one, so they're a little ahead of us. Yeah. But they are phenomenal. They've become such good friends of ours, but they are funny and they're inspirational. Yeah, really check them out.
Well, and that's just one of so many resources that are out there. I mean, just to go through and find these resources for every age. I mean, there's resources out there for even like Stations of the Cross for young children, and all the way up to watching even maybe even the Passion of the Christ or Jesus of Nazareth or something like that as a family, to really engage into that mystery on Good Friday, so that we can go through that. And there's all kinds of apps and things like that. Obviously, we don't have to have the books. It's nice to have the books, but to do that as a family, or to put an image up on the computer as a family, and meditate on the Passion throughout the day, taking that time, maybe and I think that the obvious, for a lot of people that might be listening, the obvious is, he hung on the cross from 12 to 3, that we have silence during that time, that we shut off all the screens, that we shut off what we're doing. We pray a Chapel of Divine Mercy at 3 o'clock, or do the stations at 3 o'clock. We have all these traditions, but I don't think that's always so obvious. I think we can't assume that that's obvious. I think there's a lot of people out there that, faithful as they may be, have never really taken the opportunity to have silence, like literally try to have silence for 3 hours in the middle of their day And they're like, oh, we have kids. I have kids. You have kids. And it is a challenge. I'm not saying it's not a challenge, but it is something to do. And I think that we can't assume that everyone already gets that. But these are the types of things that we can do to still enter into and make Good Friday a real day of reflection, a real day of entering into the passion, entering into the sorrows of Christ, and maybe even entering into the sorrows of Mary, pulling that rosary out and praying through one of those movies, actually praying at the agony of the garden, praying through the mystery of the agony, or whatever we can do to increase meditation, read the scriptures, read all of the gospels and their accounts of this, whatever it may be, that we encounter it in a new way, that we engage our children and our spouses in our conversations in a new way. Talk about who Christ is to us. Talk about who the Lord is in my life and why I'm thankful for the cross. Little things like that are great conversations that maybe have passed us by in years past because we went to the liturgy, we went to the stations, we went to all these things, and that becomes an easy outlet. And those are amazing things, but we don't have those now. So what can we do? Could we even, for that matter, grab a crucifix off the wall and venerate the cross on Good Friday? Allow ourselves to know that we don't do that just because it's something to do at church. We do that because it's my faith. It's our family's devotion. And I think that those are the types of things that I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I think of two things that would be, I think there is this temptation that, okay, so we can't go to church, and you're right. I think it's easy. You go to church, and now we can do whatever we wanted to do this weekend before Easter. But I think we also have the same temptation with all the technology, right? And really encourage you to, you don't have to, you can watch the Stations of the Cross, but you can do something yourself. I like all those examples. I think of our family has really just, I think, gotten a lot of doing Lectio Divina with the readings of Mass. And, if you've never done that as a family, we just read it. And then I just ask, a simple question of, what stood out to you? What kind of popped into your head? And, maybe I'll give some further questions like, well, if they say, well, it was this, and well, why? Why do you think that spoke to you? But, my kids have, once they get used to it, they know that that's what they're supposed to talk about. I think this stood out to me because I used this or whatever. They'll get used to it. I mean, it takes practice just like anything in life. But I think as a family, I've been really moved several times with the insights that my children have seen in the readings. And to do that as a family. I think something also really this Lent, or this Triduum, which, by the way, I saw somebody put up a meme that said something about, this is the lentiest Lent that's ever been lented or something like this. And here, technically speaking, right, Lent is over tonight at the Holy Thursday service. It's over. And then we're into the Triduum. While our Lent is over, the time of penance is not. And I would really encourage everyone to maybe even as a family, or at least certainly individually, think about what are we going to do to fast. So remember, Good Friday is not only a day of abstinence from meat, but it's also a fast day. And to take that seriously, and maybe even to think about, well, what could our fast be, even maybe from the Holy Thursday service to the Easter service that we're going to do, whether that's Saturday night, the vigil, or Sunday morning service, the Mass that we're going to stream or do, whatever we're going to do to celebrate Easter, and fast from something during that whole time. In other words, it's going to be awkward, right, not going to Mass on Easter morning or going to the vigil and having that group celebration, that energy that you get from celebrating and realizing what the Lord has done, that he has walked out of that tomb. So we're going to have that on our own. Well, we've said this over and over, right? If you want to truly celebrate the feast, then what do you have to do? You got to fast. Right? And the more you want to appreciate the feast, what do you have to do? The more you have to fast. And so I'd really encourage, as families to think about what are we going to do to fast and take, again, maybe from tonight at the Holy Thursday all the way to whatever the Easter celebration that we celebrate.
Yeah, and just to add one little tidbit to that is maybe as a family take that fast and offer it for someone. Offer it for that lonely person who's across the street. Offer it for grandma who's suffering. Offer it for whatever it is. But tie an intention as a family or multiple intentions as a family to that fasting so that it becomes really, really efficacious, really effective in the ability to bring about God's grace and mercy upon those people.
Yeah, whenever you have a reason to fast, it makes it more important, but let's face it, to me, it also makes it easier.
Sure.
Right? Because I have something I really want to fast
it's
for.
a sense of duty.
Tony, something that a lot of families do during this time is we dye eggs during the Easter season, right? And in fact, I remember one time, Teresa, I don't know, she must have been 6 or 7, and my firstborn child, right? And it was around this time, Holy Week, and she goes, "When are we going to kill the eggs?" And my wife and I were looking at each other going, "What? When are we going to kill the eggs?"
To dye them.
Oh, we're going to dye them. Yes. No, they're already dead. But actually, you and I actually want you to tell this story, but you and I had a unique experience this past August that we went over to the Holy Land just to do some filming. It was a crazy short trip. We were only on the ground for like 4 days, and we were doing some filming at all the holy sites. But because of that, because it was just you and I and our tour guide and someone from Select International as well, we were able to go to some places that we had never been before. And one of those places is on the Mount of Beatitudes. It's a Mount of Olives. Yeah, thank you. In that we never get to go to this church because it's a busy day, and we're going to have Mass down at the Church of All Nations, which is the Agony of the Garden. But there's a church right next to that, which is the Church of St. Mary Magdalene.
Right.
And it's interesting. It's this beautiful Orthodox church. I mean, beautiful, right?
Yeah.
The orange, the gold domes at the top. I mean, just you see it from miles away, and it has nothing to do with Mary Magdalene per se, meaning that there's no tradition that she was there, right? Her body isn't there. It's just a church dedicated to her. That's
Right.
it. Like my church is St. Francis. That's it. But we went ahead and went in there. It's only open to the public like a couple days a week, and it happened to be open. So we went in there, and when we went to the main body of the church, there were these 4 paintings, these 4 icons up at the top. And if you remember this, one painting was Jesus casting demons out of her, right? His hand is on her, and that's what we know about Mary Magdalene from the gospel. He cast 7 demons out of her. Another one was her at the foot of the cross. We know that Mary Magdalene was at the foot of the cross. The third one was her with seeing Jesus in the garden,
Right.
when she says Rabbi, and he says Mary to her. And then they had this this fourth image, and I was looking at it for like minutes. And I'm like, what is that? And finally I look at our tour guide, and he goes, "What Bible are you getting? Because I've never seen that story." And he shared with us an amazing story, and I wanted you to share that with us.
Yeah, the tradition goes that Mary Magdalene, after Jesus' resurrection, wanted to tell the whole world, and she went to Pontius Pilate to tell him, and he wouldn't hear anything of it. So she eventually went to Caesar himself and said, "Pilate has killed an innocent man. Christ is risen." And the tradition of this is the first that we hear that these words are spoken. Obviously, that's a strange thing, but I doubt that that's the first that they were spoken. But she looks at Caesar and says, "He has killed an innocent man. Christ is risen." And he looks at her and says, "Christ is as dead as that egg on the table is white." And she reaches down to the banquet table, and he said, "If Christ is risen, that egg is red." And it turns red in her hand. And he immediately sends word to dismiss Pontius Pilate from his post.
And voila, we never hear of him again.
But this egg turning red became the tradition of dyeing eggs red as an Easter tradition to represent Christ is risen. So the idea of all these different pastel colors comes from some different stories over time and different things like that. But this idea of the dyeing of the eggs started as dyeing all of the eggs red to symbolize Christ is risen, as Mary Magdalene went and told Caesar in Rome.
Yeah, and that's what, when our tour guide told us this, I was just like, what? we've been dyeing eggs since I can remember. I've never heard this story before, and there it was. And I know he wasn't lying to us because there was this picture of it, and that's why we dye eggs. And so, I encourage everybody, go kill those eggs or dye them. And
I like the idea of even making and I don't know if we're going to do this year. I haven't. My wife's probably listening to the show right now. One of the two people that are listening, my wife and your wife.
my mom's in too. So
that might be true. But the idea of the possibility of having an Easter basket that is for our whole family that is just red eggs to really emphasize the connection of, sure, we can play Easter Bunny and have eggs and all these different things going around, but the reality is, can we have something that ties that to the Easter, to that Paschal mystery, to the life, death, and resurrection, that he is risen, and have that Easter basket full of red eggs, and then give the explanation to the kids, let them, soak that up, because that's rich history. Obviously a tradition that, isn't a big T tradition, but is an amazing story and an amazing connection to the Easter mysteries.
Yeah, usually I dye all my eggs Carolina blue, Tony.
Well,
for
I'm
the
from
Tar
Nebraska,
Heels.
so I've always dyed
So
them
you're
red.
good to go. But I'll at least have to have one that's red, bright red,
right.
for this tradition. But I really encourage everybody, take advantage of this human moment that we're in, this Catholic moment, to share the gospel. I hope you enjoyed our first episode as we have relaunched Casting Nets with Tony and Chris. Again, if you could do us the huge favor of liking, sharing this, subscribe to our YouTube page, and then wherever you're at on the social media, just share this. It would really be a big help to us.